Here we go. All right. So why don't we have a word of prayer to open up, and then we will dig in to 1 through 11. So, all right, here we go. Let's bow our heads and pray. Lord, bless and be with us as we are gathered here to continue to journey with John in his vision of what was, what is, and what is to come. So help us to open our minds and hearts to what we see and hear today, that we may have understanding. Thank you for the gift of revelation, what it means to us in our time, what it meant to the Christians in John's time, and what it means to us in the time to come. And we pray, Lord, that you would come and gather your church to you. In your holy name we pray. Amen. So here we are at Holy Week. Right? We will not be meeting next Thursday, just a reminder. Okay, that's Monday, Thursday, and then we'll be back the next week, and we'll work through May. Then we'll take the summer off. I am teaching a class, Sunday school class, this summer. It'll be the one class that's actually teaching, because everybody else takes the summer off. But I'll be teaching a Sunday school class. It's really good. I'm using a curriculum. It's called 6 Themes in the Bible, of the Bible, that everyone should know. And it's a really good curriculum. I think it'll be fun. So that's going to be at the 9 o'clock hour during the summer. And it'll be in the chapel, which is now both chapel and my classroom. So just wanted to make you aware of it. There'll be information about that in the newsletter and in the bulletin. But that'll be coming up starting in the summer, probably around June, first week of June, or sometime around there. Okay, so as I said, we went through all the themes last week and picked up on the things that we're going to see. So I want to go right into the 1 through 11. Okay, and I want to read again the text. It's up here. I know it's hard to see, but I'm just going to read the text to you, and then we'll start picking it apart verse by verse. Okay. So after this, I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open, and the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne, with one seated on the throne. And the one seated there looks like jasper and carnelian, and around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. Around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 elders, dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. Coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder, and in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches, which are the 7 spirits of God. In front of the throne there is something like a sea of glass, like crystal. Around the throne and on each side of the throne are 4 living creatures, full of eyes, in front and behind. The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature with the face like a human face, and the fourth living creature like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and inside. Day and night, without ceasing, they sing, "Holy, holy, holy, the Lord God the Almighty, who was and is to come." And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to the one who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall before the one who is seated on the throne and worship the one who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, singing, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power." Hey, Doug. "For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created." So we did some of this last week. Am I right that we started this last week? Okay. How far did we get? Do you remember? Anyway, I know we did the introduction, that the central focus is on the heavenly throne, that the themes that we see here are from John are the sovereignty of God. That's the major theme. That God is envisioned by the glory around the throne. In other words, this is a vision of God in heaven, the heavenly palace, the heavenly throne room, if you want to call it that. And so God is described not as a figure of an old person with a white beard or anything like that, as depicted in art. It is the glory that envisions God. So we see the glory to be the defining image of God, the glory itself, what surrounds God. God is not really described except in any other terms but light. We'll hear the theme of creation, which is extremely important to these first 11 verses, and then we get the vision of the heavenly court. I'm not going to go through the outline. We did go through the outline, so I'm not going to go through that, but we may refer back to it, okay? As we go to the opening of it, we see, if you see the illustration that I put up here, did I use this illustration last week? Okay. So we are starting kind of fresh on the 1 through 11, the details of it. So here you see a little bit of art that shows John sitting there looking upwards as if a door were open. And that's the image that is given to us. John's vision begins with a door opening up, or a gate, if you want to talk about a gate, a door opening up, or a gate. And just as the keys to death, remember we looked at earlier, the key, remember in the 7 churches, they were given the keys to death and Hades, and we looked at the keys, the old keys that they had, and so there was the door to death and Hades, a door to the underworld. That was chapter 1:18. Here the door to heaven is here the entrance to heaven is conceptualized by a door or a gate. So we talk about the gates of heaven, and that's in fact I think I have this here. Yes, I do. This is my favorite Gates of Heaven cartoon. I love it. Back in 5 minutes. Is that great? I love that. There is actually this is from a site called gatesofheaven.com, and there are cartoons all based on the gates of heaven. So you've got Peter there, and you've got all kinds of things there. But I like the back in 5 minutes. I thought that was kind of funny. So let's note that who is it that opens the heavenly door for John? Who is it? As we begin to look at 4:1. And the first voice which I heard, what does that voice sound like? A trumpet. Come up here and I will show you what must take place after this. So who opens the door for John?
Jesus.
It's actually God. God is the first voice. Okay, God is the first voice. So make a note of that. 3 important motifs, okay, in verses 1 through 2. The door to the heavenly world is opened by God. A voice from the heavens invited John up, and then the vision follows of God. These are all motifs that we're going to see in verses 1 and 2. So basically, remember when we talked about throne room, the theme of throne room visions last week? And we said, what in some of the throne room visions in Old Testament apocalyptic, the prophet is taken up for the purpose of coming back with a message. Daniel was taken up. Isaiah was taken up. So now we see John picking up, who was, of course, an Old Testament or a Jewish apocalyptic scholar or writer, or one who preached from Jewish apocalyptic. Here he picks up, in a Christian sense, his door is open to heaven, okay? And he's going to be taken up now. And so if you look at this slide right here, number 239, the door to heaven, it's God in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, the concept of a door to heaven occurs just twice. A door to heaven. You don't see a door in the Old Testament. And he was afraid, said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Do you remember where that comes from? Does that sound familiar? It comes from a dream. We had the dream. Remember who it was? Jacob. It's Jacob's dream of Jacob's ladder. And remember, Jacob awakens and goes, this is the gate of heaven, and builds an altar there. Okay? And then in Psalm, yet he commanded the skies above and opened the door of heaven. And really, this is the only place in the Old Testament, only twice, that you see a door. But John gives us a door. okay? A gate. So that's kind of interesting in and of itself. And the door to heaven is much more common in Greek literature. So, of course, John is influenced by Hellenistic literature. He lives in a Hellenistic world, even though he's in Asia Minor. He lives in the Hellenistic world. So here's an example of the door to heaven from that time, from the Iliad, which, of course, preceded that time. And Hera swiftly touched the horses with the lash, and self-bidden groaned upon their hinges the gates of heaven, which the hours had in their keeping, to whom are entrusted great heaven and Olympus, whether to throw open the thick cloud or shut it too. There through the gate they drave their horses patient of the goad, and they found the son of Cronos as he sat apart from the other gods on the topmost peak of many-ridged Olympus. That's from the Iliad. It's from the Iliad. So we know John uses cultural. Here he's combining a concept from the Old Testament, or Old Testament apocalyptic, with a cultural image of the gate to heaven, which was illustrated not only in the Iliad, but in many other depictions in the Hellenistic world, in the Greek-influenced world. So, and if you have a question or comment, please feel free to stop anytime. Yeah?
Well, in Hellenistic culture, this would have been, heaven would be like a city, because they were walled cities, and you had to go through the gate to get in.
That's correct. And in John, when you get to the new heaven and the new earth, it's a walled city.
Right.
They even describe the walls. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a city. So here is John using Greek illustration to describe the city of God, right? And of course, using also what Jerusalem actually looked like in his time. Well, yeah, I mean, Jerusalem would have fallen by the time this was being written, but what it used to look like. Yeah, go ahead.
The word gate and the word door interchangeable?
Yeah, they are. In the Greek, they are. Yeah. It can, Greek's funny. Sometimes it's very specific. Sometimes it uses a word that can be interpreted either way. So it can be interpreted gate. It can be interpreted door. The fact that and both have a key. Both have a key. So the key is kind of the key is the key, as we might say. The key is the key. But I want you to see that this type of image in verse 1 is fed and undergirded by the culture of John's time. He's combining all these images. And so the common function, whether it was in Old Testament apocalyptic or in passages like these, the common function of each open door passage is to introduce a seer. To introduce a seer. Someone who's going to interpret to us what is behind the open door. And that's a very common theme, both secular and sacred. Okay? So John now is going to be the seer. What do you think about when you think about a seer? When you hear that word, the seer, what do you think about?
Someone who foretells the future or can see what the future is going to be.
Very good. Anything else? Very good. Anything else? Think about going to a seer to talk to a seer.
Prophet.
What's that?
Prophet.
Prophets?
Prophet.
I mean, what? Yes, prophets talk about the future, but what's the difference between a prophet and a fortune teller? What's the difference between a prophet and a fortune teller?
Fortune teller would be more related to the person that's seeking the fortune? Or?
Exactly. Exactly. Fortune teller, and maybe a little, would be on the, yeah, you're right, on the individual side. The prophet, describe the prophet in that. So if the fortune teller does that, what does the prophet do?
He foretells things.
What kind of things?
More general or global.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Global, maybe more directly to a group of people or the nation. Primarily, what the prophet does, and this is really important to understand, and this is Jesus in the role of the prophet, because remember, Jesus has three roles: priest, prophet, and king. Okay, and so we see Jesus as the prophet, and so the prophet doesn't foretell the future in the sense of like a fortune teller. The prophet takes what is obviously going to happen, what's obvious, and then applies it to the religion or the beliefs of that culture or people. So that when Jesus was talking about that Jerusalem was going to fall, it was obvious that the way things were going at that time, that Jerusalem was going to fall. That was an obvious thing that was going to happen, because the health and safety and welfare of Jerusalem depended on whichever emperor happened to be on the throne. And it's easy to say that eventually there was going to be an emperor who was going to crack down on the rebellious elements in Israel and in Jerusalem. It was inevitable. So we can make prophecies of inevitable things. If I say the United States is going to get into another war, I mean, that can sound like a prophetic statement, but it's also an obvious statement, because we're always getting in wars.
But isn't it often a warning that if you don't
Yes.
behave, this is what's going to happen?
And thank you for adding that. It's my fault for forgetting. Prophecy always has a point. You can change the outcome. A lot of time prophecy is told when you're talking to a fortune teller, this is going to happen. But when you're talking to a prophet, this could happen, and here's why, unless you change your ways. Exactly correct. Prophecy is meant to change something. So, very good. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that. Thank you very much. So we introduced the seer, and then connecting the divine epiphanies with a heavenly door was a major theme in Asia Minor during this time. The Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, where John was from, had a door that was ritually used for an epiphany of the goddess. And this was a familiar phenomena in the 7 cities of Asia Minor. So this is a recreation. There are lots of them if you look on Google. This is a recreation of what the Temple of Artemis looked like. And it's pretty accurate. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world. And there was an actual door there where the goddess or the oracle would come out and meet the people. So this was, again, a very common theme for John and in John's world, especially having grown up in Ephesus. And remember, we often see John countering the religion of the Roman and Greek culture with his religion, with his faith, with his Christianity. He counters, he counters. So now here's John himself being at the door of the temple of God, okay? All right, so let's look at the first voice. Here we go, 242. Okay, and the first voice which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Okay, so this is the voice of God, and what must come after this? That is we're going to see when we get to chapter 5. After we finish 1 through 11. Then we, because it's a short chapter. If you look, it's a very short chapter, 11 verses. Then we get to chapter 5, which is the investiture of the Lamb. So this is what's going, and then everything that follows. So what the voice is saying, and some commentators say this is the voice of Christ. So remember, when it comes to Revelation, it's all interpretive, right? So it could be the voice of Christ, okay? So, but either way, the scroll is going to be opened by the Lamb. The scroll is going to be opened by the Lamb. And when the scroll is opened, it means these things are actually going to happen. So when the scroll is the unfolding of history. And we'll talk about that as we get there. But it's the unfolding of history. So it is that, it's that theme that we just talked about a second ago of God being sovereign over history. Remember that? God being sovereign over history. And we see invitation language used once again in Revelation. Here's 2 places where invitation language is used. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who is seated on many waters." That's Revelation 17:1. 17, and then in 21:9, then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." So invitation is one of the major themes. You are invited to come and see this. And so what happens when you are invited? What happens? How do you get to go and see this vision? What does it say in 2, verse 2? How does it happen?
I was in the Spirit.
What does that mean? Let me read it. At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne. I was in the Spirit. What does that, oh, heaven's sakes, what does that mean?
Would that be kind of like an out-of-body experience, that you're no longer in your physical body, but...
It's never that exact.
Okay.
No. I mean, this term, this particular way of using the term, is found only once in the New Testament. Now, Paul talks about being caught up in the Spirit, but usually it's a charismatic event. That is more like being carried out of your body, in a sense, in the New Testament, those references. But I mean, in the Gospels and in Paul's letters. But here,
Acceptance of the invitation.
it's acceptance of the invitation, yes, but it's also an ecstatic rapture. You go into an ecstatic rapture. You are physically, it's almost like you're physically transported there, okay? When you're in the Spirit, it's like a physical event, okay? And that's why it's so rarely used. That's why it is so rarely used. Here is, immediately I was in a prophetic trance. So there's this idea of this kind of entering this is kind of this is the best illustration I could get. So, this is kind of that idea of entering into another world, entering into a trance. So it's not, we think of vision, we can think of a dream. It's not a dream. We think of you imagining something, but this, the language that's used here is of something that actually happened. The actual phrase, by the way, for John means vision trance. Vision trance. That's what the Greek word means. It's a vision trance. So the vision is so realistic that it is like a bodily experience. You are caught up in it. It's like a bodily experience. And so here's some examples of this from Revelation. I was in the Spirit on this was from chapter 1, if you recall, the inaugural vision. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet. 17:3. So he carried me away in the Spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names. Boy, it's fun when we get to that stuff. And it has 7 heads and 10 horns. And in the Spirit, he carried me away to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. So we actually see John go different places in this vision. He's carried different places and invited to come there. He is invited to come there. So it's, the phrase, what happened to John? How did this happen? That's kind of the question that's asked. Paul speaks of the same type of vision trance, the same type of vision trance. But he does so in the sense of the mind. This is right, and this is an example from Luke of the closest we come. Guided by the Spirit, Simeon came into the temple. The story of Simeon is something like a vision trance. The Greek is the same. And when the parents brought in child Jesus to do for him what was customary under the law, so guided by the Spirit, that's like bringing you in. It brings you in. And then as he's holding the child, he has this prophecy that comes forth. Remember that story? Remember that story? This child, well, let me read it to you real quick. Hang on. From Luke. It's...
Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace according to is that the one?
The Demetrius, yeah. The new Demetrius, let us depart. Yeah, that's it. You just said it. Yep, that's what I was looking for. So, the new Demetrius. Lord, let us depart in peace. I have seen my salvation. I've seen the salvation of God. So that's the kind of prophetic utterance that comes out of that. Okay, so let's start moving now. Then what should I do? What should I do then? Here's Paul. I will pray with the Spirit, but I will pray with the mind also. I will sing praise with the Spirit, but I will sing praise with the mind also. This is a different type of spiritual experience. This is more like a charismatic experience, okay? More like speaking in tongues. More like speaking in tongues. Any of you ever spoken in tongues before? Any of you ever done that? I have. I'm a child of the 70s and the late 60s, the Jesus movement. And a lot of my seminary colleagues and I cut our teeth. Now, my parents were really good about it. They didn't like freak when I began going with my friends to this charismatic community of young people in Charlotte. And they said, you just keep going to our church with us on Sunday. I said, okay, okay. But Sunday night and Wednesday night, I go to Lamb's Chapel, right? And in seminary, a lot of the pastors came out of that, or the potential pastors, the seminary students, came out of that movement, the Jesus movement. And I can tell you, speaking in tongues is really weird. It's interesting. One of the reasons that one of the reasons that drove me to seminary was to try to understand that phenomenon. And so that was part of my study. What is going on with this? But it really is a mind. And of course, we know that glossolalia is common to many cultures, not just religious glossolalia. But the interesting thing about glossolalia is while you are saying things in this ecstatic tongue, you're thinking something else. It's really interesting. It's a phenomenon, and it's really interesting. Okay, so I did, but see, the problem with me was I didn't really find that it enhanced my faith. It really didn't. It was just more of a ritual. You know what I mean? It was more of a worship act, but it didn't build up my faith, and that's why I kind of went, well, I see what Paul was talking about when he says, "If I speak in the tongue of men and angels, but do not have love." I mean, there's a point that you have to get, and I found it kind of pointless. And it would get out of control. In any group, it would get out of control. And it did. So it was kind of like, it was just, it scares most people. And I understand why. But it is a universal human phenomenon. Anyway, I just want to point that out. So that's what I think Paul's talking about here. That is like glossolalia. That's like charisms. Praying with the mind, praying with the spirit, which is different from obviously what John's talking about. John is talking about being lifted up, going into this vision trance, seeing things, not thinking things, but seeing things, like you are there, okay? That's kind of the difference between the two. I didn't mean to spend that much time on it.
Mack?
Yeah.
I was probably spending too much time.
Go ahead.
When you spoke in tongues, did you see in your brain what you were saying, or were the words coming out and you thought in your mind they were something else?
That's good. Well, that's a really good question. You're taking me way back. I was 16 years old.
Well,
I was like, no. What I'm saying is, I'm trying to remember. I remember that it was you were praying in your mind, and it was coming out in a different way. And what you have to realize is that everybody else is doing that around you. So but you were praying. You were doing an intentional prayer. It just wasn't coming out in English words. It was coming out in this unintelligible tongue. Yeah, that's the way I remember it.
I won't take up any more time.
No, go ahead and ask. It's an interesting phenomenon.
When I had my stroke, I didn't know I had a stroke.
Right.
I knew in my mind what I was saying.
Yes.
And everybody was looking at me like I was muttering preaching.
Yeah.
And it was gibberish.
It was gibberish.
It was gibberish, yeah.
But in my mind,
yes,
it was as clear as a bell.
Yeah.
What I was saying. And I wondered whether somewhere your brain takes over when you're,
very possibly. I mean, it is a universal phenomenon. I want to point that out. That's really important. It's a universal human phenomenon, usually associated with religious practice, but not always. Not always. So there's definitely something there with that, in the sense of it does happen. It was very strange because you sound like you're saying a language. It feels like a language. It really does. It feels like it's got structure, but it doesn't. Well, I guess it does, but it's a different kind of structure. So what I'm saying to you is simply, it was a good experience for me to have because it drove me toward finding out about charismatic experience. One, and it's really important because it is a part of the New Testament. I felt it was important for me to understand that. And as a minister, I still think it helps me if I talk to someone about that. If someone comes to me and said, I spoke in tongues, can we talk about that? And I go, yeah, I can understand you. Or I've done that, what do you think about it? And I can talk about my own experience of it, okay? Which again, it was an incredible experience, a human experience. But I didn't feel that I had entered into a vision trance, right? It felt very human, okay? Where when I pray in the Spirit, and you've prayed in the Spirit, we all have, that feels like you are somewhere else. Your mind, you feel like you're gone, you know, when you go into deep prayer, time goes by, and you don't even realize how much time has gone by. And that's just prayer, focused prayer. I was just curious about how that was, and I learned from it. And then I've told this story, but I'll tell it again. I think I told you guys this story, maybe not. But I was going with my friend Donnie. Did I ever tell you this story? Donnie?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, remember? And this guy got up after we had this long charismatic event, stood up and declared himself to be Jesus. And my friend Donnie looked at me and said, that ain't Jesus. I said, no, it's not. So then we went to McDonald's after the service like we always did. And there's Jesus in front of us in line at McDonald's. And my friend's going to Donnie, now write down what he orders. Write down what he orders. Because that's going to become our liturgy. We have to practice that. And he was just fooling around, but there he was. So anyway, the throne room. Let's go back here real quick. Let's see, where was I? Go back here, okay. Right here. And there in heaven, this is John, stood a throne with one seated on the throne. We talked about throne room visions. Here are some throne rooms. That looks like Versailles, but I don't know. It is Versailles. It may be. This is somewhere, probably in Spain or Europe, or Italy. That's Italy. And I don't know what that one is up there. But these, you'll notice, okay, let's look at these throne rooms. Because remember, this vision of the throne room that John has is grounded in the throne rooms of his culture and of that age. So what do you notice about throne rooms? Take a look. Just in general, what do you notice?
Well, there's an elevated place for the one in front.
Excellent. There is a dais.
Yeah.
And what's on the dais?
A chair.
A chair. Correct, a chair. What else do you notice about the throne room?
Highly decorated.
Highly decorated. Correct. Chair's missing from that one. Highly decorated, with all kinds of colors and vivid images and things like that. And then you've got like that image there, that Christian image. Then what else do you notice? It's missing from that one, but it's in the other two.
Well, from a theatrical perspective,
Yes.
it's focused.
It's focused.
Everything focused.
It draws it, yeah. That is excellent. Because remember, I told you that as we look at the heavenly throne room, we're going to see concentric circles coming out of it. All the focus is in the center, but concentric circles outside of it. So that's why I want to point to the chairs that are out there. There are others there, and they are seated. They are seated there. Who do you think would be seated in those chairs?
The advisors.
Advisors? Who else might be seated in the chairs?
In Catholicism, might be the bishops, might be the cardinals.
Anglicanism, certainly the cardinals, the bishops, family. So knights. Yeah, so generals. So they're definitely. So what I'm saying is, you're going to see this kind of placement in the vision of the throne room. It's very similar. It's got a similar kind of look to it. So we're looking at kind of a heavenly depiction of what would you call first century, second century throne room to some degree. Mesopotamia, Israel, just different ones. Okay. So let's go to the throne of God is central to both OT and UT, to both Old Testament and New Testament conception of heaven, and is based upon the throne rooms of the early monarchs. In the Old Testament, we see God sitting on a throne both in vision and in metaphor. The first one is a vision from Isaiah. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Here is a metaphor from Psalms. God is king over the nations. God sits on his holy throne. It's a poetic image, okay? So we see this throne used literally in a vision and sometimes as an image of authority. This is authority over the nations, authority over history, okay? So we'll see that, we'll see it done in several different ways.
In the Jewish temple, with the, obviously there was no proper throne, but there wasn't that where the Ark of the Covenant was in the Holy of Holies.
The Holy of Holies, the inner room, yes, that's where, well, that's, I mean, the Holy of Holies was, the Ark of the Covenant was missing, right, was lost. Of course, they reproduced it. But also, it was where God met the one priest that went in one time a year, once a year, and met God. So that was the place where God actually came, kind of face to face, to meet the high priest. Okay, so it was, like I said, it was the holiest of holies. And since we're in Holy Week, or about to begin, what happened after Jesus died in the Gospel of John?
Rent the curtain.
The Holy of Holies, the curtain was torn. Now God's no longer hiding in the dark room of the temple. Now God is there to be seen. See?
So there wasn't a door.
There was no door.
To get into the Holy of Holies was a curtain.
Yeah, it was a curtain. That's correct. Yep, there was no door. Now, there was a door into the inner chamber where it was. There was a door into the inner chamber. So the temple had different doors into each section. Or openings, let's say openings, because it may not actually have been a door you closed. It may have just been an opening. But so there was a way you got in and there was an area around it, but at the center was the curtain and the veil, or the veil, okay? And that's where the sacrifice, the high priest made the sacrifice once a year at Passover to be given to for the people, on behalf of the people. And that's where God met the people. It's the tent of meeting, the tabernacle from the Old Testament. The tabernacle, tent of meeting. So like I said, we see it, and then someone. Okay, now what do we see next? Okay, and there's the Handel's Messiah. I put that illustration in just because it's interesting. It's used. This image is used in Revelation in place of the name of God. What does it say there? At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne with one or someone seated on the throne. You notice that one is not identified. It doesn't say who it is. Why not? Why didn't John say God or Jesus or whatever? Why does it say someone?
Well, look at the description in the next verse.
Okay, let's go forward, all right? And the one seated there looks like, and then there's the brilliant images.
And that you're going to have to put
Exactly.
in English for me. I don't. Well, Jasper is the name of a cat.
Don't worry, I've got you covered.
Okay.
My slides have you covered, okay? But it's it's used in the place of the name of God, and there's that. Old Testament did not use the name of God. They didn't use it. So if you're going to envision it, they might have said Yahweh. They could have said Yahweh, but you didn't even use, you'd have to use YHWH. But if you're going to describe it, the idea would be, again, remember, it is the glory that describes who's on the throne, not a name. It's the glory. God is interpreted through these images. So if you were to say, it's God on the throne, oh, okay, close the book. We know who it is. But what's more interesting is, who is on the throne? Well, here's the image of it. Let's look at the image, okay? Because like you said, it can be a little confusing, okay? So we come down to verse 3, okay? The one seated there, in verse 3, looks like jasper and carnelian, and around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald, okay? Well, first of all, I've got this 253 to show that God is often depicted as some form of light. God is often depicted as some form of light. Even Abraham is not allowed, does not see. Why do you not see God's face in the Old Testament? Why not?
You would die.
You would die. You would die. Exactly. It was a death sentence to see the face of God. And the idea was the glory would be, your mind couldn't handle it. Your body and mind couldn't handle it. The glory would be so great. So here's a perfect Gustave Doré wood cutting, that shows God as light, as that light. And this was the creation of Eve. But it's very interesting, you know, that God here is depicted as light. And God often is depicted in light. So, now, here is going to be John using color, light images, to depict who's sitting on the throne, okay? Images of the spectrum images of light. So let's take a look at these images and see, what do they mean? Here's I just want to give you a couple examples of where God is imagined as light. God, the creator and provider, this is from Psalms, bless the Lord, O my soul, O my Lord God, you are very great. You are clothed with honor and majesty, wrapped in light as with a garment. We think of white light, but that light doesn't have to be white, does it? Light can cover the spectrums like a rainbow, right? 1 Timothy, it is he alone who has immortality and dwells in unapproachable light, whom no one has ever seen or can see. To him be honor and eternal dominion. So John these are not visual descriptions. These are descriptions of what you can't see. John's going to show us what you can see, okay? And describe that to us. And of the Old Testament prophets, only Ezekiel had visions of God that included colors. And here it is. And above the dome over their heads, there was something like a throne, in appearance like sapphire. And seated above the likeness of a throne was something that seemed like a human form. Notice the vagueness of the language. Upward from what appeared like the loins, I saw something like gleaming amber. Something that looked like fire enclosed all around, and downward from what looked like the loins, I saw something that looked like fire. And there was a splendor all around, like the bow in a cloud on a rainy day. Such was the appearance of the splendor all around. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell on my face and heard the voice of someone speaking. So clearly, John, let me run back real quick. Clearly, John knows this passage, and he's expanding upon the passage. Because Ezekiel is really the only one that uses color to describe the image of God. The only one. So here is John directly we're going right back to Ezekiel, okay? And showing us something. So let's talk about the colors. What is the significance of the colors? Well, here's jasper, kind of a deep crimson. And jasper is used as a simile for God, and later in Revelation as an image for the appearance of the New Jerusalem. So jasper is used in Revelation several times. It's one of the jewels that encrust the wall of the New Jerusalem. Jasper is this, and it is really important to understand. These stones are uniquely found in Asia Minor. Carnelian and jasper are uniquely found in Asia Minor. So, Dad, did you know what jasper looked like? I didn't either, till I did the slide.
Obviously, you did.
You get that right.
No notion.
So jasper is used, and I think I've got the references. Yeah, here's the Revelation. It has the glory of God. This is the new city, and radiance like a very rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. The wall is built of jasper.
Wait,
I know.
clear as crystal.
I know.
That's not clear at all. That's red.
It's okay, but I mean, but he's describing the jasper is clear, which could mean pure. Clear can mean pure with no specks, no faults.
Oh,
That it could mean that.
it's a trick.
Well, not a trick. It is Greek. It is Greek. You know that old saying, it's all Greek to me? So clarity could mean purity. We think about a clear diamond, a pure diamond. The wall is built of jasper, while the city is pure gold. See, here's the pure gold. Clear as glass. Clear as glass. The foundations of the wall of the city are adorned with every jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third, is it agate? Agate. The fourth, emerald. So here we see Revelations uses these images both to represent the New Jerusalem that descends from heaven and to represent the one who sits upon the throne in heaven. Carnelian is really interesting. There's carnelian. It is a blood red stone named after Sardis, the city of Sardis, near where it is found. So, of course, John would use carnelian. Of course he would. Because that is one of Sardis's wealthier, it was rare and hard to find. So, of course, he would use Sardis. That's another cultural reference. And here is, the next one is emerald, okay? And it's, I want to read that to you, emerald. This is the Carolina emerald. Was cut from a 59-carat rough emerald crystal that was discovered in 1969 from the Rist Ellis mines by Wayne Anthony of Lincoln, North Carolina, my first cousin. My family on my father's side are rock hounds, all of them. I never got into it, but they are. And they went up to Hiddenite to dig for jewels. It was laying under loose dirt. It was not a great quality emerald, but it was huge, massive. Now, at the time, it was the largest emerald in 1969 ever found on the North American continent, but they found a bigger one later on. But it was cut. Tiffany's cut it, and I guess somebody owns it or still has somewhere. My cousin didn't get it. He sold it for like nothing. He didn't cut it because he knew it would mess it up. He couldn't. He had to get it to somebody professional. I think he got some money, but not what it was worth. I love my cousin. He was a great guy. He was great. Taught me how to ride a motorcycle when I was 12 years old. Great guy.
Don't forget that.
Oh, you never forget that. And he had this. He had this like look like James Dean. He really looked like him, talked like him, and he was just cool. He just had this cool look. And he found the emerald, but unfortunately, he smoked a lot and finally killed him. In that way, he smoked like. He was so cool that he smoked himself to death. So, anyway, I smoked until I stopped. In seminary, it got expensive. So that's just an aside. So John emphasizes that the theme of God is the focus of a series of concentric circles. So now we see the emerald rainbow. The emerald rainbow. And of course, what's the first thing we think about when we think about a rainbow from a biblical perspective?
Oh, covenant. Flood, after the flood.
The covenant, exactly. After the flood. Yes, the covenant. That's the rainbow, okay? So here is the emerald rainbow representing the promise fulfilled. The promise fulfilled and completed. Creation is completed now. So you have this emerald rainbow. And again, this is, it's hard for us to imagine this, but it's just a way of describing the glory of God, okay? Also interestingly, the 3 stones are among the 12 precious stones that was attached to the breastplate of the high priest. And this is from Ezekiel 28. You shall set in it 4 rows of stones. A row of carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald shall be the first row. And the second row, a turquoise, a sapphire, and a moonstone. And the third row, a jacinth, an agate, thanks, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They shall be set in gold filigree. So again, that's from Ezekiel. So in Ezekiel, we see these, the images of God connected to reflected in the high priest, the image, the breastplate of the high priest.
Now that lower right one's supposed to be jasper, and you showed us jasper looked like
That would be
upper right.
Upper right.
Yeah, that would be the upper right one. Yeah. So I mean, how is it? That's translated from the Hebrew, for heaven's sakes, the ancient Hebrew. And again, these translations from the Old Testament can be very.
Now they were lucky they found a picture of the breastplate.
That's pretty amazing in and of itself, I think. Although that could have been painted or something. I don't know.
Well, it's ordered from bottom to top, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly not ordered in the way that's...
Maybe it's ordered the way Hebrew is read.
Right there, what?
Could that be the case? Could it be ordered the way Hebrew is read? Start bottom, boop, boop, like that. Is that possible?
Hebrew goes from right to left, but it goes up and down.
Yeah, it goes up and down.
Japanese goes...
Right. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I never did do well in Hebrew, so...
It says that jasper could be blue or purple.
Oh, interesting, good. Thank
That's
you.
the most common color.
Most common color.
Say that again.
Yeah.
Jasper could be purple, blue, yellow, but the most common color is red.
Oh.
Yeah, it says usually red, yellow, brown, or green in color, rarely blue.
Yeah.
So nobody knows what jasper is.
Well, they would know the quality of the stone, or they probably could tell by the stone itself. Rock hounds. I mean, they could, they can identify stone. Well, no matter what the color is, they can identify what the stone itself is.
Yeah, diamonds are different colors too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, Genesis 9. I want to show you Genesis 9, 16 through 17. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it, and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. Remember that the theme, what is the theme at the end of verse 11? What are they praising God for? What are they praising God for at the very end, in verse 11? Jump ahead. Creation. So here's John using the image of the rainbow, the natural image of the rainbow. It is every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And so there's that creation theme coming out in the description around the throne. And this is going to be a hymn to creation, to God's creation, okay? To God's creation.
Something with a rainbow that looks like an emerald.
Well, think about, it's really, the thing you cannot do with Revelation is try to think of it literally. You really can't. You really can't. Because what's more important than the literal vision of it is what it relates to. Here, John is relating to Ezekiel. And that's what's important for John. This is the consistency of Jewish apocalyptic becoming Christian apocalyptic. So he's using images directly from Ezekiel. Remember, Ezekiel's the only one that uses color. So he's borrowing directly from Ezekiel to write this image. So what's important here is its relationship to the genre of apocalyptic, rather than trying to imagine what it looks like.
So net is, don't try to make sense out of it.
You make sense out of it by saying we know where it comes from. That's how you make sense out of it.
Okay.
We see where this comes from. But this is a good point. I mean, why do we study Revelation? It does have a point. It does. I thought the first 7 churches are easy, aren't they? But now we get to this, and it's like, whoa, why are we doing this? But remember, we talked about. Revelation is a it's a joining together of 3 basic books. The 7 letters is what we're familiar with. But that was written last, even though it's the first one in Revelation. This is early apocalyptic that John has adjusted to Christianity. Okay? And that's why some even say that this first 11 verses is an ancient apocalypse, and then comes John's vision of the investiture of the Lamb. And that's where the Christian vision begins. But this is an ancient one, apocalypse, maybe even written by John himself, an ancient one, that really praises God the Creator, because that was the central theme of Jewish apocalyptic. In Isaiah, in Daniel, in Ezekiel, God was always praised for creation, not salvation. Jewish apocalyptic did not have a salvation theme to it. It was not repent so you can be here. Yeah.
Just on the topic of a rainbow like an emerald. First of all, it's poetry. So
it's poetry. Very good.
But secondly, there are times when you see a rainbow and you don't see all of the colors.
Right, right.
You just see certain bands that are showing up for whatever
Right.
reason in the atmosphere. So maybe that's also shed some light.
Well, here's another part that we struggle for. What was in John's culture that it might have been relating to?
Yeah.
Was there an image of a god or a goddess that had that kind? Because remember, I mean, we forget that the statues, the images were in color. It just, the color wore off. But they were always painted. So was there an image of a god that was with a green rainbow or over its head or something like that? In fact, we're going to come to where we see some bows. Because Zeus carried a bow. So we're going to see some images like that as we go. But see, that's what I'm saying. We don't even know what the cultural reference might be, because we've lost that culture. But we do find cultural references. That's what I'm saying. We do find them. They're in there. Okay. So first we see this rainbow. That's the first concentric circle. Okay. And now we come to the second concentric circle. Around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 what? Elders, okay? Dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads, okay? So now we know white robes. We're familiar with white robes from the first part, right? You will be, the first 7 churches. You will be clothed in white, right? So what's the white robe? Do you remember what's a symbol of? Purity. The martyrs are clothed in white. Their blood has been transformed into salvation. All these kind of images. But these are the... So the next question, of course, is, who are these elders? So here, this is one of the best illustrations I found. There is Jesus, there is God on the throne with the Lamb. And notice the artist didn't use light, but depicted God with the Lamb beside God. And God's an old man with a beard, right? And there are the elders, the 24, okay? And there's some cherubim and seraphim. And there's the rainbow. It's not emerald, it's different colors. There's the rainbow. So this is an attempt to literalize the images. And you can see it doesn't really do the images justice. It's really hard to do. And that's the point. This isn't to be literalized in our head. Okay? It's not to do that. It has, and that's why this part of Revelation is such a struggle for us. It has cultural references to John's day. It's got Jewish apocalyptic references that we are not aware of because we don't study Jewish apocalyptic. So it's a real struggle for us to this. Like I said, these sections are the ones that are really hard. All right, I'm going to stop it a little bit. Let's keep moving forward here. We're making pretty good progress here. Okay. So who are these 24 elders? Let's see. Okay. Some say that they are grounded in the mythological tradition of the 24 star gods of the Babylonian Parthenon. That would be the 24 star gods, that was a cult. That was a cult, an astrological cult, okay? When the Magi came from Persia, they were astrologers, not astronomers. They were astrologers. This would be the kind of thing. So some are saying that John is making an equal, vision to those 24 star gods. But believe me, probably some scholar just found the number 24 and said, well, there, that fits. That can happen too. Others say the 24 courses of the Aaronic priest from Chronicles. The first lot fell to, well, I'm not going to read it all, but there it is. The 24 courses. So the 24, what would you call them? Courses would be sections. Or cores, is what I call it. But the 24 courses of the Aaronic priest. So, again, that's an image from Chronicles. That's an image from Chronicles, okay? Others combine the 12 patriarchs of Israel with the 12 apostles. So 12 patriarchs with 12 apostles, Revelation 21, it has a great high wall with 12 gates, and the gates, 12 angels, and on the gates are inscribed the names of the 12 tribes of the Israelites, on the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city has 12 foundations, and on them are the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So this is, this is pretty likely that the 24 elders represent I would say that's a pretty solid image, since we come back to it later at the end of Revelation. But most contemporary commentators agree that the 24 elders represent an exalted angelic order that serve as a heavenly counterpart to the 24 priestly orders and the 24 Levitical orders. And what do they do? What do these orders do? On the earth, these orders are royal and they're judicial. So the idea is that these 24 elders are reflecting an earthly throne room again, surrounded by these elders who represent royalty and sacerdotal and judicial.
Sacerdotal?
Sacerdotal. What does sacerdotal mean?
Sorry,
Look at it on Google real quick for me. Look it up on Google real quick. I mean, I know, but I guess I can't remember. Grab it on Google.
How do you spell
Sacerdotal.
Is that sometimes pronounced sacerdotal?
Sacerdotal, yeah, it could be sacerdotal, yeah. Sacerdotal is kind of the academic term.
S-A-C, what?
Sacerdotal. Sacerdotal.
Speaking in tongues again.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
Did it pop up?
Relating to priests or the priesthood?
Thank you.
Say that again.
Relating to priests or the priesthood?
So they are the priest of the empire or the nation. That would be there. They're sacerdotal. They represent the priest, representing God. So here they act as the priest. These 24. Okay. Thank you for finding that. Shows you how dumb I am, but I forget these things. It was a long time ago when I studied the word sacerdotal. So I'm sure I didn't study it. It just came out and passed it. Sacred. The royal, the sacred, and that's it. The royal, the sacred, and the judicial. And so, let's see, did I jump back? Let's see. Okay, let's go back then. Okay, so in ancient Israel, the term elder was used in several ways. So we got the number 24. We see the possibilities that they could be, right?
You went through a whole litany of 12.
We looked at what combinations of 12 and 12 could it be, and there were some secular or other gods, the 24 star gods. Okay, then there were the 12 patriarchs of Israel, the 12 tribes, leaders of the 12 tribes, with the 12 apostles, and that was referred to later in Revelation.
Oh, 12 and 12.
12 and 12, correct, 12 and 12. And that term in Revelation 21 showed 12 names in one place and the 12 apostles' names on the other.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So that equals the 24. Yeah. And then what most commentators say, it is a mirror image of the throne room and this circle of attendants, officials, attendants. So it's actually just a reflection of the throne rooms of the culture of John's time. Because throne rooms, they had this group assembled around them that had a royal function, a sacerdotal or priestly function, and a judicial function to judge. So that's kind of what most commentators say. Any question about that before we move on? I want to be sure. So we got the number, what the possibility could be. Now let's talk about elders. In ancient Israel, the term elder was used in several ways. A designation for authority or leadership over social groups in ancient Israel. Any social group. Any leader of a social group could be called an elder. Social groups. As national leaders, a national leader could be called an elder. For various types of religious and political authority. It's a very broad word in Israel, in the Old Testament and in Israel. In the synagogues, the elders were members of the council of the local Jewish communities. And we see the elders judge Jesus. We see, do you remember some of the elders from the New Testament that we see? Not the priests, but the elders. Who did Jesus talk to at night? Nicodemus was an elder. Nicodemus was an elder. Joseph of Arimathea was an elder. Okay, so they generally didn't really have a priestly function. That they were regarded to be wise and they could make judgments. Okay, used in early Christianity for ordained leadership, and this is interesting because that word presbyteros, or presbyter. Presbyter in the Greek means elder, okay? But it was used for deacons and ministers. Those terms in the early church were very loosely used. There wasn't a stratification of those roles until much later, like 3rd century. They began to really, the priesthood didn't even arise until much, much later. Past 500, when the priesthood arose. So the term was always very, very loosely used. Very loosely used. And Ignatius uses the term for the College of Elders or the Presbytery. I went to Presbytery on Saturday, the College of Elders. And guess who it was who condemned Jesus to the cross? The College of Elders. The Presbytery. And it's called, in the Greek, the presbyteros. The Sanhedrin is a Hebrew term. Presbyteros is the Greek term. Sanhedrin's Aramaic. Okay? So the reason I say that is because I'll tell you, I may have told you a story, I may not have, but I was in Charlotte, in the Presbytery of Charlotte, which Old Southern, before the merger, Old Southern Presbytery, and it had all the professors from Davidson College in it. And they were Presbyterian professors. They were tough. I mean, really tough. So Billy Graham grew up in Charlotte, right? And he wanted to become a Presbyterian minister. This is a true story. He actually preached at one of the churches that I served, had preached there before, as a very young student, okay? So he came to the Presbytery of Charlotte, and they said, well, we can approve you, but you have to know your languages, Greek and Hebrew. And he didn't want to take the time to learn the Greek and the Hebrew, because he already had studied. So they turned down Billy Graham. The Presbytery would not ordain Billy Graham. But the languages are important. In interpretation, the languages are important. They really are. They really are.
And what was the reference to Davidson?
Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina. It's a Presbyterian college. And it was a part of the Presbytery. All the professors were a part of the Presbytery because they were ordained or they were elders. And they would come and sit in judgment. These poor seminary students.
Wilson boys went to school.
These poor seminary students would come before them. and would be just, it was worse than defending a dissertation. They would just grill them, just grill them. So they had so many turn downs that I became chair of the candidates committee. So, and I was chair of examinations. So it was my job to get them through. Well, I knew the questions they were going to ask. So I would give our seminarians a book and say, read this. And I underlined the questions you're going to get asked. And they all started passing. Every one of them. And sometimes I had to stop the examination and go, that's not fair. That's not, I would. I'd have to stop and go, no, we're not, that question's not acceptable. And because I was already ordained and I was chair of the committee, they would accept that. They would accept that. But man, they made it really tough.
I'll bet they were sorry to see you go.
I bet they partied hardy.
No, I don't believe that.
Well, I got to say, let me tell you about real quick. Now that was Mecklenburg Presbyterian. I was ordained in Western Carolina Presbyterian, which you didn't come before Presbytery to be examined. You came before a committee of pastors. And they warned me before I went in, bring some good jokes. Really. So they haven't even read my ordination exams. They waited until you got a call to a church, then they opened them up and read them to this committee. Yeah. Whereas in the system now, you take the test, you get it graded, then you get to go look for a call. So back then, you have the call. So I go in and I start telling my jokes. It's a smoke-filled room of men. And I start telling my jokes. And they start laughing. And then they start telling me jokes. And then they ask me a few theological questions, a few Bible questions, and they go, you're passed. Welcome. That was Western Carolina Presbyterian, not Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg was like...
What type of a rigorous question would they ask that you would consider unfair?
Generally, maybe it would be taking a Greek word and what does this Greek word mean? Well, that was ridiculous because we didn't memorize Greek words. We had to pass basic Greek and then we could take an additional Greek in seminary. But you didn't, unless you were going to be a PhD, you didn't study. You didn't have to have a working knowledge. You had to be able to look it up. You had to be able to look it up. And I still look up. When I prepare sermons, if I get to a passage that I'm not sure about, I look the Greek up. And it clarifies for me. Or it gives me the options. Usually with every Greek word, there's 3 or 4 options. So you choose which one you want to use in writing your sermon. So I have all these aids to help me look up the Greek word. And that was unfair. I said, wait. No. We're not going to do that, Let's get back to an actual question. This isn't a Greek exam, Yeah, they loved me. They really did. So that kind of thing. They would ask just really tough, just stuff that really didn't even make sense. Very highly academic stuff. But not about what that pastor was knew or believed or confessed. Basics like what is baptism? Explain it in baptism. That's a fair question. Okay? But, give the different interpretations of the Greek word for baptism. Baptismos. No. That's a scholarship question, okay? So it was that kind of thing, But they finally got, and then I left, and I don't know what happened after that. So, okay, so here is this this interpretation of elders, all this interpretation, and so I hated to divert from that. We're going to stop here in a minute, but I just wanted to, So, in Revelation, the 24 elders play an important role in the heavenly worship of God. Then I saw thrones, and those seated on them were given authority to judge. I also saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony to Jesus and for the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or its image and had not received its mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. And the word here that's used is elders, even though you don't see it here. The authority to judge. The authority to judge. They represent those who have been martyred. Martyred are represented by these elders. That's an example of that, okay? If you're martyred, you're given authority, but it's a representational authority. They are dressed in white robes. For John, clothing is an essential part of the individual's character. In Judaism, white garments represented, as we already talked about, joy and purity and dignity. In fact, as we come to Holy Week, the seamless garment that they took off of Christ, that was his white garment. It was the most expensive thing he owned. It was the most expensive thing he owned. And that's why, and it was a very expensive piece of clothing, which is why they did not divide it among themselves, but cast lots for it. Because it was the seamless tunic made of a very rich wool. And of course, they would strip anyone for crucifixion of everything they had. That was the whole point. Take away everything you had. Okay. So, and then the golden crowns. Of course, we can know what crowns represent. Wreaths and special garments were cultic attire for various ritual and political processions in the Roman culture, particularly for priests of the imperial cult. Now, what's the imperial cult? Worshiping the emperor. They wore golden crowns, right? So here's another counter image to that. See? Here's another counter image to that image. What I want to show you, and we'll close with this today, the lyrics, the Holy, 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 the most accurate depiction of Revelation in a hymn I've ever seen, or actually one of the most accurate depictions of just pure Bible verses. And as I mentioned before, it's hymn number 1. Early in the morning, and as we read this, you're going to see that this is exactly what we see in this chapter. Holy, 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 all the saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. Cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, which wert and art and evermore shall be. That's direct quote. Holy, 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 though the darkness hide thee, though the eye of sinful men thy glory may not see, only thou art holy, there is none beside thee, perfect in power, in love, and purity. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, all thy works shall praise thy name, in earth and sky and sea, creation, theme of creation. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty God in 3 persons, blessed Trinity. So it's just beautiful hymn. One of our favorite hymns in all of Christianity comes from Revelation. So you see, the images work in poetry and in hymnody. You know, Handel's Messiah, the images work. But for us, when we're doing biblical scholarship, it's really difficult to understand, you know, what they are. But when you translate that into a hymn, wow, it's magnificent. It's magnificent. Casting down their golden crowns. We're going to see them cast their crowns down. Casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. It's an amazing scene. And it's wonderful that the most sacred and well-known hymn in our Christianity is a hymn of praise, reflecting the eternal praise that God receives. People say to me, what's heaven going to be like? A golf course? You can eat all you want or drink all you want and not get fat? Chocolate heaven? Da, da, da. No, it's like church forever. No, it can't be. Yes. It's forever church. Except there's no space between you and the one you're worshiping. That's what it is. Eternal, and this is the song, or the image of the song. The song that images that worship. So, I found that amazing. I really do. Okay, let's stop right there for now. We have some fruit. We're not going to do the quiche anymore because it really wasn't getting eaten. And we didn't want it to go into waste. But fruit, everybody eats, right? So we have fruit, and let's eat fruit. Those of you who like fruit. Any questions? And we'll pick up next week at verse 5 and move, hopefully, yeah, we should be able to get there to the end. Or not next week, but the following week. Not next week, Monday, Thursday. Come worship on Monday, Thursday, okay? And Good Friday at noon, if you can come. And then, of course, Easter Day, sunrise service, 6 a.m., 6 a.m. with 10 dozen donuts. Holy, holy, holy. Doesn't mention Krispy Kreme in that song, but 10 dozen donuts. And then of course, then we go into our breakfast. After eating 10 dozen donuts, then we go eat breakfast. And then we go into our Sunday service. The cantata. The cantata.
Where is the sunrise service?
Right out front. In the dog garden. In the, what do we call Trinity Garden, or whatever we call it. Creation Park, whatever we call it. It's out there. And you know, it's a beautiful setting. It really is. You can see the sun come up. And it's a lovely setting. It is. So, it's very enjoyable. People come in their pajamas, and you know, that's fine. You're welcome to do that. You can come dressed as you are. So, and it's a short service, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, a couple hours, whatever. If I get wound up, you could be there all day. Right? Right. Okay. So let's have a word of prayer and we'll be out here. Lord, we thank you so much for struggling and wrestling with these images, which is what we do, Lord, because we want to learn and understand. And of course, Lord, sometimes visually seeing it is as important in understanding as understanding the words or understanding why those images were used. So help us, Lord, to be students in every way, not just that we think of making sense of every word, but of making sense from various points of view, so that we can understand what John is doing for us and what you are doing for us through John. In your holy name we pray.